Have you ever heard of a dog who kept a promise, even after his master died? This is the story of a soldier, a man who knew his time was running out, and the German shepherd he trained to protect the two people he loved most. But what happened after the soldier's death? No one could explain. A dog that seemed to know when danger was coming. A storm, a stranger, and a miracle that could only be described as something sent from God. Stay with us till the end. I promise this story will touch your heart. If it moves you, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share this story with someone who needs a little faith today. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you and your loved ones. The wind that swept across the Montana plains that October morning carried a cold that stung the skin and whispered of an early winter. The sky was wide and cloudless, a pale, washed-out blue that seemed to stretch forever. The small town of Helena lay quiet beneath it, dust lifting from gravel roads as the first sunlight touched the rooftops. The air smelled faintly of pine and the coming frost, that sharp, clean scent that always made David Miller feel both alive and strangely nostalgic. David was 38, a man built from discipline and years of service. His frame was lean but strong, the kind that came from carrying weight more emotional than physical. His hair, once dark, had begun to show streaks of gray near the temples, a quiet reminder that time didn't stop for soldiers. His face was angular, with a square jaw and a few days' worth of stubble that he never seemed to bother shaving. Deep lines framed his eyes, not just from the sun or age, but from memories he never spoke about. He had served for 15 years in the U.S. Army's K-9 division, training dogs to detect explosives and find soldiers buried in ruins. Somewhere in those years, he had seen too much, the kind of too much that doesn't fade even when the uniforms are gone. That morning, he sat in his truck outside Helena Regional Hospital, holding a thin white envelope that weighed more than a rifle ever had. His knuckles were pale from how tightly he gripped it. Inside were the words that had changed his life in less than a minute. Stage 4 lung cancer. Estimated survival time, 18 months, with treatment. He had stared at those words for hours, feeling his chest tighten not from illness, but from fear. Fear not of death, but of what would happen to the people he loved most once he was gone. Anna Miller was 33, his wife of 7 years. She worked as a nurse at the same hospital that had given him the news. Anna was tall and slender, with a quiet strength that hid behind her gentle face. Her light brown hair, always tied back in a loose bun, framed a complexion touched by the Montana sun, not pale but warm, almost honey-colored. Her voice was soft, but when she spoke to patients, there was a firmness that told you she'd seen pain before and had learned to face it head-on. At home, though, she laughed easily, the kind of laugh that made even bad days feel survivable. Their daughter, Lily, was 5, a small, bright thing with curls the color of copper and eyes as blue as the winter sky. She had her mother's kindness and her father's stubbornness. Every evening, she waited by the window for her father to come home from the training field, pressing her small hands against the glass when she saw his truck pull in. But today, David didn't drive straight home. He turned off onto a dirt road that led to the old training camp on the edge of town, a place he had once used to train K-9 units for deployment. The wooden fences leaned from years of neglect, and the tall grass had begun to reclaim the empty field. But to David, this place still felt alive. He stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching beneath his boots, and looked toward the single kennel that wasn't empty. Inside was a German shepherd, large, muscular, its coat a mix of black and tan, eyes alert but calm. The dog stood as soon as it saw him, tail wagging slightly, though its posture remained disciplined. The tag on its collar read, Rex. David had bought Rex from an old army buddy 6 months ago, the son of one of his retired service dogs, bred for intelligence and loyalty. Rex was 2 years old, still young enough to learn, but already carrying that unshakable focus that set shepherds apart. David opened the gate and Rex trotted toward him, pressing his head gently against the man's leg. "Easy, boy," David murmured, his voice steady but low. He knelt, running a rough hand along Rex's neck. "We've got work to do." The next few hours passed with the rhythm of commands and obedience. Sit. Stay. Heel. Rex responded flawlessly. When David tossed a rubber ball across the yard, the dog sprinted, muscles coiling and releasing with perfect precision. But it wasn't just drills. David was watching how Rex thought, how he reacted to emotion, to tone, to silence, to hesitation. He wasn't training a soldier, he was training a guardian. At one point, David leaned against the fence, coughing hard enough that blood spotted his sleeve. Rex, sensing something was wrong, pressed close, head nudging against David's arm. "I'm fine," David lied, wiping the blood away quickly. "We're fine." As the sun began to sink behind the pines, the air turned gold, and long shadows stretched across the field. David leaned on the fence, watching Rex sit obediently at his side. "You see that house, boy?" he said quietly, pointing toward the small silhouette of his home in the distance. "That's your family now. You'll protect them, no matter what. That's your mission." Rex tilted his head, as if listening. His ears perked up at the name Anna when David mentioned it. The dog didn't understand the words, but something in his tone, that soft, trembling edge, told him it mattered. By the time David returned home, the sky had gone purple, the first stars flickering above the ridge. Anna met him at the porch, smiling as she wiped her hands on a dish towel. "You're late again?" she teased gently. "Had some things to finish at the yard," he said, managing a faint smile. Lily came running out barefoot, giggling as Rex followed behind. "Daddy! Rex caught the ball 3 times!" she shouted, eyes wide with excitement. David scooped her up, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Did he now? He's getting better every day?" Anna watched them, her heart swelling, not knowing that behind his smile, David's mind was a storm of plans and fear. That night, when the house went quiet and his family slept, he sat alone on the porch, looking out at the dark horizon. The cancer was an enemy he couldn't fight with bullets or training, but he could prepare. He could leave something behind, not money, not medals, but a protector. Rex lay beside him, head resting on his boots. David looked down at the dog and whispered, "You're my last mission, buddy." The wind howled softly through the pine trees, carrying the scent of snow. The stars overhead blurred as David blinked against tears he hadn't planned to shed. The old soldier took a deep breath, the cold air burning his lungs, and made a silent promise to his family that even if he wouldn't live to see his daughter grow up, someone would always be there to watch over her. And so, under the silver light of the Montana night, David Miller began the final mission of his life, training a German shepherd named Rex to protect everything he loved when he no longer could. The first frost of November came early that year, dusting the yellowing grass around the Miller farmhouse with silver. Each morning, mist hung low across the field like a ghost that refused to leave. David Miller stood in that pale light, breath clouding in the air, his gloved hands gripping a whistle and a worn leather leash. His body had grown thinner since the last hospital visit, the hollows beneath his cheekbones sharper, but his eyes, steady and blue-gray, still carried that same quiet authority that once commanded soldiers and dogs alike. Rex trotted beside him, tail swaying, every step precise. The two moved together with the rhythm of men and animals who understood each other without needing words. The training ground, a stretch of land fenced in by weathered posts, had become their world. Every day began the same: short whistle, firm commands, repetition. But this was no ordinary obedience training. This was legacy work. "Protect Lily," David said in a calm but commanding tone. Rex froze, eyes tracking the small figure running across the grass. Lily, dressed in a red coat and knit hat, was giggling as she chased falling leaves. The shepherd turned to face her, lowering his stance slightly, muscles tensed. "Stay," David followed. Rex remained still, eyes locked on the child. "Good boy," David whispered. Anna watched from the porch, a mug of coffee in her hands. The steam fogged her glasses as she studied her husband. There was something different about the way he moved, slower, more deliberate. She had noticed the cough worsening and the way his hands sometimes trembled when he thought no one was looking. Still, he smiled every morning, assuring her that it was nothing serious. She wanted to believe him, but deep down, she knew better. Later that afternoon, a rust-colored pickup truck rumbled down the road and pulled into their yard. The man who stepped out was Tom Sanders, an old friend from David's Army days. Tom was in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard streaked with gray and a limp in his right leg, the result of a roadside explosion during his second deployment in Iraq. His denim jacket was faded and frayed at the elbows, and his expression was both warm and weathered, like someone who had seen the worst of life, but refused to give up on its small beauties. "Still barking orders, huh?" Tom called out, his deep voice carrying across the field. David smiled faintly. "Only to the ones that listen," he replied, patting Rex's head. Tom chuckled, making his way over. "Damn fine dog," he said, crouching down to study Rex. "Shepherd, about 2 years old, looks sharp. Smarter than most people I know," David said. "I'm teaching him a few special commands." Tom's eyes flicked briefly toward David's pale face. "You okay, brother?" he asked quietly, his tone losing its casual edge. "Just a cold." David lied again, same as always. Tom didn't press, but his frown deepened. He'd seen that kind of look before, men trying to hide what couldn't be hidden. Instead, he stood and offered a pat on the shoulder. "If you ever need anything, you know where to find me. Still working out by the fire station. We could use a guy like you." David nodded, though they both knew that day would never come. When evening fell, the golden light stretched long across the yard. Lily sat by the fence drawing on her little sketch pad, while Rex lay beside her, head on his paws. David set up a few wooden posts and old tires, turning the clearing into an obstacle course. The cold air burned his lungs, but he ignored the pain. Each command mattered. Each motion engraved purpose into the dog's mind. He taught Rex how to respond to distress. When Lily screamed, when Anna called, when the lights went out. "Stay with Anna," he said firmly, tapping his chest and then pointing toward the house. Rex followed his gesture, repeating the motion until the words became instinct. Then came the final command, one David had never used before, not even in the army. He crouched beside Rex, voice low and steady. "Find home." Rex tilted his head. David pressed his hand against the dog's chest. If they're lost, if they need someone, you bring them home. He repeated the phrase over and over until the dog's breathing matched his own. When the sun dipped below the ridge, Anna called from the porch. "Dinner's ready." Her voice broke the chill like the warmth of a hearth. Inside, the kitchen glowed with soft lamplight. The smell of stew filled the air. Lily sat at the table, swinging her legs, while Anna stirred the pot. David watched them, the two people who made every breath still worth taking, and felt something twist inside him. After dinner, when Anna tucked Lily into bed, David lingered outside with Tom, who had stayed for a drink. They stood under a sky thick with stars, the kind of silence that carried meaning. "She doesn't know, does she?" Tom asked quietly. David shook his head. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. I want her to remember me. Strong." Tom looked at him for a long moment, jaw tightening. "You've always been stubborn as hell." David smiled faintly. "That's how I survived." When Tom finally left, David walked out to the training field once more. The frost had hardened the ground, and the night smelled of wood smoke. Rex followed, pressing close against his leg. David knelt, resting a hand on the dog's back. "You've got to be ready soon," he murmured. "They'll need you more than me." Rex's ears flicked, and he leaned into David's touch, tail sweeping lightly against the dirt. The moonlight glinted in his amber eyes, and for a moment David could almost believe the dog understood every word. From the upstairs window, Anna watched her husband kneel in the cold, one hand resting on the shepherd's head. Something inside her ached, the kind of ache that had no name. She didn't yet know that the man she loved was racing against time, or that every command he gave the dog was a prayer disguised as training. Down below, David whispered again into the night. "Protect Lily. Stay with Anna. Find home." And as the wind swept across the empty fields, the echo of his voice carried into the dark. Part command, part farewell. The first blizzard of December came without warning. The sky over Helena turned white and wild, the kind of cold that bit into bone. Snow buried the fence posts and piled against the barn doors. Inside the Miller farmhouse, the walls creaked under the wind, and every sound felt sharper, heavier, as though the world itself was holding its breath. David Miller was already awake when the dawn came. He stood in the garage wearing his old army jacket, the one with the frayed cuffs and faded flag patch on the shoulder. His breath came in short bursts, and his chest burned with every inhale. He moved slowly, shoveling feed into Rex's metal bowl, but halfway through, the shovel slipped from his grasp. His vision blurred. The garage tilted, and he went down hard on one knee, one hand clutching the cold concrete. Rex barked once, a sharp, alarmed sound. The German shepherd was 4 years old now, a full-grown protector, muscles taut under his thick winter coat. His fur had deepened into a darker blend of black and tan, his amber eyes bright with intelligence and worry. He nudged David's shoulder, whining low in his throat. David tried to rise, but his legs betrayed him. The room dimmed around the edges, and he felt a hot, metallic taste fill his mouth. Anna heard the sound from the kitchen. She was dressed in her scrubs, ready for an early hospital shift, her hair tied up, face pale under the yellow kitchen light. "David?" she called, setting down her mug. When no answer came, she rushed outside, snow crunching beneath her boots. She found him on the cold floor, his lips pale, Rex hovering protectively beside him. "Oh my God, David!" she cried, dropping to her knees. Her hands were trembling as she checked for a pulse. He was alive, Barely. Hold on, please, just hold on. An ambulance came 20 minutes later, its siren wailing through the storm. The driver, Mark Reynolds, was a man in his late 30s, broad-shouldered with kind eyes and a steady voice that carried the authority of experience. He'd been working in Helena's emergency service for nearly a decade, the kind of man who had seen both tragedy and small miracles and learned to keep his heart somewhere in between. "Let's move," he said calmly to his partner, Elena Cruz, a petite woman in her early 30s with short dark hair and sharp focus in her expression. Together they lifted David onto a stretcher, their breath visible in the freezing air. Anna rode with them, holding David's hand as the truck bounced along the snow-covered road. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please." At the hospital, fluorescent lights painted everything in sterile shades of white and blue. Anna ran beside the stretcher, heart pounding, until they turned down a corridor she couldn't follow. She waited in the hallway, staring at the snow melting off her boots, Rex's leash clutched in her hand. The dog sat quietly beside her, head tilted, sensing the weight of every moment. Hours passed. A doctor, Dr. Paul Grant, mid-50s, tall and thin with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual air of exhaustion, approached her with the expression she'd given to so many families herself. She knew that look. "Anna," he said gently, "it's time we talked." When he explained the truth, advanced cancer spread through both lungs, too late for surgery. Her world narrowed into a single sound, the steady beep of a monitor echoing down the hall. "No," she whispered. "There has to be something." Paul shook his head, his voice quiet but firm. "We can keep him comfortable, but it's time to bring him home." That night, the house was silent except for the sound of the wind against the windows. David lay in bed, his skin pale, breath shallow but peaceful for the first time in days. The morphine dulled the pain but left him floating between waking and dreams. Lily sat beside him, clutching his hand, her copper curls spilling across the blanket. "Daddy, will you get better?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly, eyes heavy. "Maybe not better," he said, voice hoarse, "but I'll always be here." He touched her cheek, memorizing the warmth of her skin, the way she looked at him with all the innocence of a world untouched by loss. Rex lay curled at the foot of the bed, his head resting on his paws. His ears twitched at every sound, the faint hum of the heater, Anna's muffled sob in the hallway, Lily's quiet breathing. The shepherd had learned to read emotions like orders. Fear meant protect, sadness meant stay close. And tonight, he stayed closer than ever. Anna came in, sitting beside him. Her hands trembled as she brushed his hair back. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "We could have fought it together." David looked at her, eyes glassy but still gentle. "Because I wanted to spare you the fight. You've already given me everything." Outside, snow drifted down heavier, blanketing the porch and the training field beyond. Somewhere deep in the night, David stirred again. He reached out toward Rex, his fingers brushing the dog's head. "Rex," he murmured, barely audible. "Protect them. Keep them safe. And if you can, find someone with a heart like mine." Rex's eyes lifted to meet his. For a long moment, man and dog held each other's gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Then the wind rattled the window pane, and David's hand went still. The morning came quiet. The storm had ended. The world outside was white and still, the kind of silence that feels sacred. Anna woke before dawn, feeling the absence before she even opened her eyes. Lily was asleep beside her father, clutching his hand. Rex sat vigil at the foot of the bed, unmoving. Anna pressed her face against David's shoulder, tears soaking into the fabric of his old jacket. Rex raised his head slightly, letting out a soft, low whine. Not confusion, but understanding. Something deep and instinctive told him his mission had begun. Outside, the wind had stopped. The Montana winter showed no mercy that year. After David's passing, snow blanketed the fields for weeks, sealing the world in a cold silence that only the wind dared to disturb. The Miller farmhouse sat at the edge of those endless plains, a small shape of light surrounded by miles of white. Inside, Anna Miller woke before dawn every day. Her hands were rougher now, her shoulders stooped slightly from exhaustion. She worked double shifts at the hospital in Helena and spent the evenings keeping the house running, making sure Lily had warm meals and that Rex was fed and groomed. Her face, once soft and open, had grown thinner, and her blue-gray eyes carried a quiet, constant fatigue. Yet there was still something steady in her, that kind of strength born from love and necessity. Lily was now 6, growing taller but still small enough to curl up on the living room couch with Rex, her copper curls spilling over his dark fur. She spoke to the shepherd constantly, about her day, about school, about the dream she had where Daddy was still fixing the fence. Rex listened, as he always had, ears perked, eyes calm and patient. When she laughed, he wagged his tail. When she cried, he rested his head on her lap. It was as if the dog had absorbed some part of David's soul, that same quiet watchfulness, that steady devotion. One Thursday evening, the snow began to fall harder than usual. The sky turned gray long before sunset, and by 5 o'clock, visibility had vanished completely. Anna had just finished her hospital shift and was driving home, the wipers scraping frantically against the windshield. The mountain road twisted and dipped through pine forests, and each turn seemed narrower than the last. Her old Chevy groaned in protest as tires slid slightly on the ice. Lily sat in the back seat, hugging her backpack, humming softly. Then came the sound, a harsh crunch, followed by the spin of tires losing traction. The truck swerved, veered toward a snowbank, and stopped halfway off the road. "Damn it," Anna whispered, heart pounding. She tried the ignition again, but the tires only dug deeper. Snow hammered against the windows like fists. "Mom, are we stuck?" Lily's voice was small but steady. "It's okay, baby," Anna said, forcing calm into her tone. "We'll figure it out." She reached for her phone, but there was no signal. The temperature was dropping fast. Back at the farmhouse, Rex stirred suddenly. He'd been lying near the wood stove, but his ears pricked up, head lifting sharply. He stood, pacing toward the door, whining. Something deep in him, instinct, memory, loyalty, told him something was wrong. When no one answered his quiet barks, he pushed harder, scratching the wood until the latch gave. Then he bolted out into the storm. The snow came up to his chest, but he ran with the precision of a trained animal, following a scent he could never mistake. Anna's, faint but certain, his paws cut through the drifts, his breath steaming in the freezing air. 2 miles away, on the same road, Jack Turner was fighting the storm from the other side. Jack was 40, tall, with the sturdy build of a man who had spent most of his life outdoors. His face bore the marks of time and service. A faint scar cutting along his jawline, gray beginning to show in his beard. His eyes were a deep brown, thoughtful but often distant, the kind that had seen too much war and too little peace. He had served 15 years as a rescue dog handler in the Marine Corps, leading missions in flooded towns and collapsed buildings. After retirement, he'd settled in Montana, running a small kennel that trained dogs for search and rescue. That night, Jack had been out checking on a neighbor's property when his headlights caught movement, a dark shape bounding through the storm. He slowed his truck and leaned forward. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. It was a German shepherd, fur matted with snow, eyes burning with determination. Rex stopped in front of the vehicle, barking sharply, then ran a few steps ahead, turning back as if to say, "Follow me." Jack recognized the behavior instantly. "Show me, boy," he said, pulling his coat tighter and following in his truck. A few minutes later, the dog led him to the stranded Chevy. Anna was trying to dig out the tires with a small shovel, her face red from cold, hair stuck to her forehead. She froze when she saw the lights approach. Jack stepped out, his voice carrying easily over the wind. "You all right, ma'am?" Anna exhaled in relief. "We're stuck. Been trying to get traction for 20 minutes. "Lucky for you," he said, smiling faintly. "You've got one hell of a rescuer." He nodded toward Rex, who stood proudly between them, tail wagging once. "Rex!" Lily squealed from the window, pressing her small hands against the glass. "You know him?" Jack asked, surprised. Anna nodded, eyes softening. "He's our dog. I don't even know how he got here." Jack knelt beside Rex, examining the dog's collar. German Shepherd, strong gait, perfect focus. Someone trained this guy well. Anna looked at him, a flicker of pain in her expression. "My husband did, before he passed." Jack's smile faded into quiet respect. Then he trained him right. This dog knew where to go. Together they cleared the snow from the tires and laid down sand from Jack's truck bed. After a few tense minutes, the Chevy roared back to life. Anna offered him a grateful look. "You probably saved us." Jack shrugged modestly. "Just following the dog's lead." When they reached the farmhouse, Jack helped carry groceries inside. The heat from the stove hit them immediately, fogging the air with warmth. Lily ran to hang her coat while Rex curled up by the fire, finally at ease. Anna poured coffee for Jack as he sat by the table, his gloved hands still red from the cold. "You live nearby?" she asked. "About 5 miles east. Got a small place, few dogs, lots of silence," he said with a chuckle that sounded rusty, like he wasn't used to laughing anymore. "Rescue dogs?" He nodded. "That's what I do now. Used to train them for missions overseas. These days I help local teams, floods, missing hikers, that kind of thing." As the night deepened, the storm eased. When Jack finally stood to leave, Anna walked him to the door. "Thank you again," she said softly. "Don't thank me," he replied, glancing at Rex. "Thank him. He's the one who found me." Rex lifted his head, tail thumping once against the floor, as if acknowledging the truth. From that night on, Jack began stopping by more often, first to check the fence after the storm, then to help repair the old barn door, and sometimes just to share a quiet meal. The house didn't feel as cold anymore, and though Anna never said it aloud, somewhere in the back of her mind, she felt the faint, comforting sense that David's final wish had begun to unfold. Spring returned to Montana slowly, as if testing whether the frozen earth could bear warmth again. Snow retreated from the fields, revealing green beneath the white. The air smelled of thawing soil and pine, and the sky stretched wider, clearer, as if the storms of winter had finally loosened their hold. At the Miller farmhouse, time had begun to heal in quiet, steady ways. The grief that once filled every room had softened into memory, not gone but gentler, like a scar that no longer hurt to touch. Anna stood by the porch one morning, her hair undone, the wind teasing it across her face. The exhaustion that had once marked her eyes had faded, replaced by something calmer. She still wore the same old denim jacket David used to tease her about, the one 2 sizes too big. But she had filled it now, not with sadness, but resilience. The hospital shifts were still long, the bills still came, but life was no longer just survival. There were mornings of laughter again, and small moments of peace she never thought she'd find. Lily was 7 now, full of boundless curiosity. She ran barefoot across the field, her copper curls bouncing behind her, clutching a wildflower bouquet she had made herself. Her voice carried through the air like a song. "Rex, come on!" she shouted, and the German shepherd obeyed without hesitation. He was older now, nearly 5, his fur thick and slightly grayed at the muzzle. But he moved with the grace of a soldier still on duty, never straying too far from her side. Jack Turner had become a fixture in their lives by then. What began as casual help after the storm turned into regular visits, fixing the roof one week, mending the fence another, sharing meals in between. He never imposed, never asked for more than company. He carried the quiet confidence of a man who'd been through battles both seen and unseen. Jack's face had the kind of rugged honesty that made people trust him. His hair, dark brown streaked with gray, was always a little unkempt, and his beard, short but scruffy, gave him a rough charm. But it was his eyes, deep brown and steady, that revealed who he really was. A man who had lost people too, and who understood how fragile second chances could be. One Saturday afternoon, he brought over a small wooden box. "Thought you might want this for the garden," he said. Inside were hand-carved markers for each vegetable bed, carrots, lettuce, beans, each one etched carefully by hand. Anna smiled, touched by the detail. "You made these?" "Helps me stay busy," Jack replied with a shrug. Quiet hands, quiet mind. Lily peeked inside the box, eyes wide. "Can I paint them?" Jack crouched down to her level, his voice gentle. "Only if you promise not to paint Rex pink again." The girl giggled, and even Anna laughed, the kind of laugh that hadn't come easily for years. That spring, Jack started helping more around the farm. Together, they repaired the old barn where David used to keep his tools. Anna watched the way Jack worked, methodical, respectful, never rushing, as if he understood the weight that lingered in every nail and board. He didn't try to replace what was gone. He simply cared for what remained. One evening, when the light turned gold and the sky burned orange, the 3 of them, Anna, Lily, and Jack, walked down to the meadow with Rex trotting beside them. The grass had grown high, brushing against their legs as they moved. Lily skipped ahead, chasing fireflies, while Jack and Anna fell into step behind her. "She's growing up fast," Jack said quietly. Anna nodded. "Too fast sometimes. I still see her as that little girl waiting by the window for David's truck." Jack's expression softened. He was a good man. I didn't know him, but I can feel it here. He placed a hand gently against his chest. Anna looked at him then. Really looked. The sunlight caught the edges of his face, the faint scar along his jaw, the weary kindness in his eyes. "He would have liked you," she said. "He believed good men were hard to find." Jack smiled, a bit awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm not sure I'm one of those, but I'll do my best for you two." They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the rustle of wind through the grass and Lily's laughter in the distance. Then, without thinking, Anna reached for his hand. It was rough and warm, and for the first time in years, her heart didn't feel heavy. From a small rise on the hill, Rex watched them, The shepherd stood still, ears perked, tail swaying slowly. The evening light bathed him in gold, catching the silver that had begun to show along his coat. His gaze followed the three figures below, the woman he'd sworn to protect, the child he'd grown up beside, and the man who now walked with them. There was no jealousy in him, no confusion, only understanding. Somewhere deep in his instinct, he recognized that the promise he'd been given, find someone with a heart like mine, had finally been fulfilled. As the sun dipped below the ridge, Lily turned and waved. "Come on, Rex," she called. The dog barked once, a sharp sound that echoed across the field, and trotted down to join them. He moved between Anna and Jack, his presence quiet but sure, as if guarding the space between love lost and love found. When they reached the house again, the porch light flickered on. The smell of supper drifted from the kitchen. Lily ran inside ahead of them, Rex following at her heels. Anna paused on the steps, looking out at the horizon where the last of the light faded. She felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Behind her, Jack stopped, his hand resting lightly on the doorframe. "You okay?" he asked. She turned, smiling softly. "Yeah," she said. "I think we're finally okay." Rex settled by the doorway, lowering himself onto the porch with a low sigh. The wind carried the faint scent of rain, and in the distance, the grass rippled like waves under the twilight. The dog lifted his head one last time, eyes reflecting the last traces of sunlight, calm, proud, and somehow content. And if anyone had looked close enough, they might have thought that in that quiet evening light, he was smiling. Sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings. He sends them with fur, 4 paws, and eyes that see into the heart. David's story reminds us that love never truly ends. It simply changes form. When David left this world, he left behind more than memories. He left a guardian, a promise, and a piece of faith that somehow found its way home through Rex. Maybe that's how God works. Through quiet miracles, through loyal hearts, through people and creatures who appear just when we need them most. In life, we all lose something, a loved one, a dream, a piece of who we used to be. But if we look closely, we'll find that every loss carries a gift, a new beginning shaped by love that never died, only transformed. Like Anna and Lily, we too are guided by unseen hands, watched over by those who went before us. So if you've ever looked at your dog and felt they understood your pain, if you've ever felt comfort come from nowhere on your hardest night, maybe that was God whispering, "You're not alone." May God bless you and your family. May He give you strength to face the storms and gentle signs in small paws, warm eyes, or kind souls, to remind you that love is still alive. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment about your own story of faith, love, or a loyal friend who changed your life. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more stories of miracles, kindness, and the beauty of God's quiet ways. God bless you. May His grace walk beside you, always.